Thank you for clicking in this video. In this gripping tale of survival, trust is shattered, fear takes hold, and escaping the shadows may be the only way to stay alive.
Imagine a place where history bleeds into the present, where every creak and groan in the walls whispers tales of terror from the past. This place exists, nestled in a forgotten corner of a small town, hidden away from the world's prying eyes. The locals don't talk about it, at least, not with strangers. But if you listen closely, you might hear a hushed conversation, a nervous laugh, or even a tale passed down through generations. This is the story of the old Crestfall Hotel, a place where shadows move on their own and time stands still. The Crestfall Hotel was once a grand establishment, boasting elegant architecture and luxurious amenities that drew visitors from far and wide. But that was before the fire of 1925, a night when flames licked the walls and claimed the lives of more than a dozen guests. They say the hotel never recovered, that it became a shell of its former self, a place of sorrow, where the echoes of that tragic night continue to resonate within its halls. Have you ever walked into a room and felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the very air around you were thick with fear? This is the feeling that envelopes anyone who dares to step inside the Crestfall Hotel. Those who do are often met with strange occurrences, doors that slam shut on their own, lights that flicker and die without reason, and cold spots that seem to move as though something unseen is passing by. But it's not just the odd noises or fleeting shadows that unsettle the soul. It's the stories of those who stayed there and never left. There's the tale of the bride who was set to marry on the day of the fire, only to be consumed by the flames in her wedding dress. Her ghost, they say, still roams the corridors, searching for her groom. Then there's the story of the children who were trapped in the nursery as the fire raged, their playful laughter now replaced with cries of anguish that can still be heard on quiet nights. The town's residents are no strangers to these stories, yet they've learned to live with the hotel's presence, as one learns to live with an old scar. They avoid it, shunning the building and its dark past, but a few brave souls have ventured inside, determined to uncover the truth behind the legends. One such group, a team of paranormal investigators, set out to spend the night in the hotel, armed with cameras, recording devices, and a strong dose of skepticism. They chose the most notorious room, the infamous room 217, where countless guests had reported encounters with the supernatural. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hotel's facade, the investigators entered. They were greeted by a silence so profound it seemed unnatural, as though the very building were holding its breath. The air was thick with anticipation, and the once beautiful lobby now lay in ruins, a testament to the years of neglect and decay. Dust particles danced in the beams of their flashlights as they made their way through the hotel, each step echoing eerily in the stillness. But as the night wore on, what started as a routine investigation quickly turned into something else. The cameras began to capture things that couldn't be explained, shapes moving in the darkness, disembodied voices calling out, and, most chilling of all, a figure standing at the end of the corridor, shrouded in shadows. Could it be the bride, still searching for her lost love? Or was it something else entirely, something older, more malevolent? What do you think they found? Would you dare to spend a night in the Crestfall Hotel, knowing what might be waiting for you in the darkness? The team of investigators set up their equipment in room 217, the air heavy with a sense of anticipation and unease. This room had long been the epicenter of the hotel's haunted reputation, and as the investigators began their work, the atmosphere around them seemed to thicken with each passing minute. They had heard the stories, of course, how guests had woken in the dead of night to find a woman standing at the foot of their bed, her eyes filled with sorrow, her dress charred and tattered. But they were professionals, and they didn't let the tales distract them from their task. With cameras rolling and audio recorders placed strategically around the room, they began by asking simple questions, hoping to provoke a response. "Is there anyone here with us?" one of them asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a soft, almost imperceptible knock echoed through the room. The team exchanged uneasy glances, but they pressed on. As the night deepened, the temperature in the room began to drop, the chill seeping into their bones. The investigators huddled together, their breath visible in the cold air, yet there was no explanation for the sudden change in temperature. The heaters had been turned on, and the outside weather was mild. It was as though the room itself was reacting to their presence, responding to their intrusion. Suddenly, one of the cameras caught a flash of movement. A shadow darted across the screen, too fast and too fluid to be dismissed as a trick of the light. The team members, now on high alert, reviewed the footage, their hands trembling as they rewound the tape. There it was again, a dark figure moving through the room, almost as if it were observing them. Was it the bride, the legendary spirit of room 217? Or was something else lurking in the shadows, something far more sinister? The investigation took a darker turn when they heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside the room. They froze, listening intently. The steps were slow and deliberate, as though someone, or something, was pacing back and forth. The team quickly grabbed their equipment and rushed into the corridor, only to find it empty. But the footsteps continued, echoing through the hall, growing louder and more insistent with each passing second. Where were they coming from? And who, or what, was making them? In a moment of sheer bravery, or perhaps foolishness, one of the investigators called out into the darkness, demanding that whatever was their show itself. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and for a heartbeat, the silence was deafening. Then, from the end of the corridor, a figure began to materialize, a woman, her features indistinct but her presence unmistakable. She seemed to be made of shadows, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. The team watched in stunned silence as the figure slowly turned towards them, her eyes, two dark voids, locking onto theirs. She began to move towards them, her steps eerily silent now, as if she were floating just above the ground. The air grew colder still, and a sense of dread settled over the investigators, their courage wavering in the face of the unknown. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the figure vanished, dissolving into the darkness like smoke. The team was left standing in the empty corridor, their hearts pounding in their chests, the weight of what they had just witnessed pressing down on them. What had they seen? Was it truly the ghost of the bride, or was it something else entirely, something that defied explanation? They returned to room 217, shaken but determined to continue. But as the night wore on, the events grew more terrifying. The doors of the room began to slam shut on their own, and the walls seemed to vibrate with a low, ominous hum. The team's equipment malfunctioned, cameras cutting out and audio devices picking up strange, unintelligible whispers. It was as if the hotel itself was rejecting their presence, trying to drive them out before they uncovered its darkest secrets. And yet, despite the fear, they pressed on, driven by a need to understand what was happening around them. What was it that haunted the Crestfall Hotel? Was it the restless spirits of those who had died in the fire, or something much older, much darker? The answers, it seemed, were just out of reach, hidden in the shadows that clung to the hotel like a shroud. As the clock ticked towards midnight, the team realized that they were no longer alone in room 217. The air had grown heavy, oppressive, and a faint scent of smoke filled the room, as though the fire that had destroyed the hotel was burning once more. The investigators could feel eyes on them, watching their every move, and a sense of impending doom settled over them like a thick fog. What would happen if they stayed until morning? Would they live to tell the tale, or would they become just another story, another lost soul trapped within the walls of the Crestfall Hotel? The closer the investigators came to midnight, the more intense the atmosphere in room 217 became. The room seemed alive, the walls pulsing with a malevolent energy that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. The temperature continued to plummet, and the smell of smoke grew stronger, choking the air and making it difficult to breathe. It was as if the room was reliving the fire of 1925, dragging the investigators into the very heart of the tragedy that had doomed the Crestfall Hotel. Suddenly, without warning, the room was plunged into darkness. The lights flickered and died, leaving the team in pitch black, their only source of illumination the small glow from their equipment screens. Panic began to set in as the investigators fumbled to restore power, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. But the darkness was impenetrable, and no amount of switching or rewiring seemed to bring the lights back. They were trapped in the room, the oppressive blackness pressing down on them from all sides. Then, from somewhere in the room, a low, guttural growl filled the air. It wasn't the sound of a human voice, but something primal, something ancient. The sound reverberated through the walls, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. The team huddled together, their fear palpable, as the growl turned into a series of harsh, rasping breaths. Something was in the room with them, something unseen but very much present. One of the investigators, in a desperate attempt to capture evidence, turned on a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the room. The light caught something in the corner, an indistinct shape, shifting and writhing as though it were made of smoke. The growling grew louder, and the shape began to take form, twisting into something that defied explanation. Was it human? Animal? Or something else entirely, something that had no place in this world? The beam of the flashlight trembled as the investigator held it steady, his heart pounding in his chest. The shape in the corner continued to shift, growing larger, more defined, until it became clear that whatever it was coming closer. The figure moved with a slow, deliberate intent, as if savoring the fear that radiated from the team. And then, just as the investigator was about to drop the light, the shape lunged forward, its form solidifying into something monstrous. The room erupted into chaos. The investigators scrambled to get away, their screams echoing off the walls as the figure bore down on them. Equipment was knocked over, cameras toppled, and the air was filled with the sound of terrified shouting. The growl had turned into a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The team was trapped, unable to escape the room or the terror that had manifested before them. But then, in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. The roar was cut off abruptly, as if someone had turned off a switch. The figure, now fully formed and towering over the investigators, hesitated, its dark, malevolent eyes fixed on something behind them. The room grew eerily silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting just enough for the team to catch their breath. What had stopped the creature? And why? Slowly, the investigators turned, their eyes following the figure's gaze. There, standing in the doorway, was another shape, this one faint, almost transparent, but unmistakably human. It was the bride, the spirit of room 217, her form shimmering like a mirage in the dim light. She stood there, her expression sorrowful but resolute, as if she were confronting the creature that had terrorized the room for decades. The figure seemed to recoil at the sight of the bride, its form shrinking back into the shadows. For a moment, it looked as though the two entities were locked in a silent battle, a struggle that transcended the physical world. The air crackled with energy, the tension so thick it was nearly suffocating. And then, with a final, ear-splitting scream, the monstrous figure dissolved into nothingness, leaving the room empty and silent once more. The bride lingered for a moment longer, her eyes meeting those of the investigators. There was a sadness there, a longing that spoke of a deep, unfulfilled desire. She seemed to waver, her form flickering, before she too began to fade, her presence growing fainter until it disappeared altogether. The room was still again, the oppressive weight lifted, leaving the team standing in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Had the bride saved them? Or had they merely been witnesses to a battle between two entities, each with its own dark history tied to the Crestfall Hotel? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the investigators gathered their equipment, their hands still shaking from the encounter. They knew one thing for certain: whatever they had experienced in room 217 was far beyond anything they had anticipated, and it was something they would never forget. The investigators left the Crestfall Hotel in the early hours of the morning, their minds reeling from the night's events. The cold, oppressive atmosphere of room 217 had lifted, but the memories of what they had experienced remained vivid, etched into their minds. As they drove away from the old building, the silence in the car was heavy with the unspoken questions that lingered in the air. What had they really encountered in that room? And why had the spirit of the bride intervened at the last moment? Back in the safety of their office, they reviewed the footage, hoping to find some answers in the recordings. The videos showed everything: the growling, the shifting shadows, the terrifying figure that had manifested in the room. But what stood out the most was the moment the bride had appeared, her presence as clear on the screen as it had been in the room. The investigators watched in awe as she confronted the monstrous figure, her form growing brighter until the creature was forced to retreat. But the footage also raised more questions. Who was the bride? What was her connection to the Crestfall Hotel, and why had she appeared to protect the investigators? The old stories spoke of a woman who had died in the fire, but the details were vague, lost to time. And what of the dark figure that had terrorized the room? What was it, and why had it remained in the hotel for so long, haunting room 217 with such malevolence? As they pieced together the events of the night, the investigators realized that they had only scratched the surface of the mysteries surrounding the Crestfall Hotel. The building was steeped in history, its walls echoing with the memories of those who had lived and died within its rooms. And while they had encountered something truly terrifying, they knew that there was still much they didn't understand, much that remained hidden in the shadows. The experience changed them, leaving them with a deeper respect for the unknown, for the things that couldn't be explained by science or logic. They had gone into the Crestfall Hotel seeking answers, but they had left with more questions than they had ever imagined. The encounter in room 217 had shown them that some places are haunted not just by the spirits of the past, but by the very memories and emotions that had been imprinted on the walls over time. The story of their investigation quickly spread, drawing the attention of paranormal enthusiasts and skeptics alike. The footage they captured became the subject of intense debate, with some insisting that it was definitive proof of the supernatural, while others argued that it could be explained away as a trick of the light or a clever hoax. But the investigators knew the truth. What they had experienced in room 217 was real, and it had changed them forever. In the weeks that followed, they returned to the Crestfall Hotel, determined to uncover the truth about the bride and the dark figure that haunted room 217. But despite their efforts, they found little more than fragmented stories and half-forgotten legends, pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. The hotel remained an enigma, its secrets locked away in the walls, waiting for the next group of investigators to brave its haunted halls. And as for room 217, it remained as it always had been, a place of mystery, a room where the past and present collided in ways that defied explanation. The bride, the dark figure, the strange events that had unfolded, all of it lingered in the air, a reminder that some things are beyond understanding, that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. As they walked away from the hotel for the last time, The investigators couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the spirits of the Crestfall Hotel were still with them, following them into the daylight. They had survived their encounter with the unknown, but they knew that they had only glimpsed a fraction of the darkness that lurked within the hotel's walls. And in the end, they were left with a single, haunting question. Would they ever truly escape the shadow of room 217, or would it follow them, a dark presence that lingered in their minds, reminding them that some places are never truly at rest?
If you want to watch another story, there is another video appearing on your screen now. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more spine-chilling stories.